Sometimes in baking, you've got to go backwards to go forwards. So today, I'm revisiting the classics. I'm using a medieval ingredient in my pie, recreating an ancient pudding and celebrating the way our mothers used to bake. Welcome to Pies and Puds for another helping of Britain's heartiest comfort food. For me, it's the best grub going. Today, I'm stepping back in time to delve into the history of the mysteriously named Pom Pudding. Normally I'll eat anything. I'm a bit nervous about this. And I'll be creating my modern and devilishly decadent version.
Wow.
My kitchen is your kitchen. Tom Kerridge shows me how to rustle up his mum's bread and butter pudding with a touch of Michelin star magic. Did your mum have one of them?
No, she did.
Pork and apple is a match made in heaven, so I'm making a scrumptious pork and apple pie, but with a very special and a very ancient ingredient called verjus. This is the sage and apple verjus. And more recipe classics from the Hollywood archive. This time, it's Jam Tarts and Ginger Biscuits, courtesy of my own mother.
Have you not made these before?
No.
No.
And my guests get to tuck into all the dishes and tell me what they think. I love the part that pies and puds play in our food heritage. Many of them are based on centuries-old traditional recipes, and Sussex pom pudding is the most ancient of puddings. So I decided to roll back the years. But what is a pom pudding? I've come to the historic Michelin Priory in the heart of Sussex to meet archaeologist Dr. Alex Langlands, who I hope can help me get to the bottom of this curiously named dish. You're a Sussex boy, aren't you?
Yeah, that's right. I grew up on the other side of the marsh here, and as an archaeologist and historian, I'm always interested in Sussex life, Sussex archaeology, and Sussex food as well.
It's specifically about the pom pudding.
Yeah.
I mean, what do you know about it?
Well, I mean, I've always heard it talked about when I was a kid, and it's always conjured up ideas of sort of sludgy water, you know, pond water, and something that's not particularly tasty. But having raked around amongst a few recipes, it's got a very basic structure. A big ball of butter is encased in a suet crust pastry. And the name, we think, comes from the idea that you cut this pudding open and it's then surrounded by this pond of melted butter.
The original medieval ingredients of butter and suet still remain, but over the years the recipe has evolved.
Well, here we go, Paul. Medieval kitchen.
Dr. Alex has got some ingredients, and I think I know what's in store. I'm beginning to feel the reason why I'm here. I'm going to be making some pastry.
You're going to be making some pastry, Paul, yeah?
Right. Alex has rummaged through the history books for 3 recipes. One from the medieval times, another from the 18th century, and one dating from post-war rationing in the early 1950s. One of the most important ingredients in all 3 recipes is suet.
This is a fat from cow, and it's a fat that comes from around the inner organs, so it's very high in saturated fats. So it's the kind of food that really you and I should avoid today. But of course, to the medieval worker who spent all his life out in the fields in all sorts of weather, you need this kind of calorific intake just to last a day.
The medieval pudding is made from a suet dough, wrapped around a lump of butter. That's a lot of butter to go inside something which is so ancient. I mean, it's full of fat, really, isn't it?
In some ways, this is the one I'm most interested in, because this is going to give us the taste of authentic medieval Sussex.
Absolutely.
That's great to see it coming together.
The dough is wrapped in muslin covered in flour, which seals the cloth and stops the fat escaping into the water.
I'm going to dangle it in the pot. So I then pull all of these together.
We've got that tied off, sealed off.
Yep.
That whole thing then goes into the water.
Simple as that.
And then it's boiled.
Simple as that, yeah.
OK. By the 18th century, the Georgians were importing exotic new flavours from abroad. So their recipe for a pom pudding adds dried fruit and spices such as nutmeg, not to mention a truckload of butter. one 18th century pond pudding. You see, it's akin to a spotted dick. Next up is the 1950s version. This recipe uses a whole lemon in the middle. Flavoured with brown sugar and a pinch of cinnamon.
The connoisseur's touch.
Yes. With our 3 puddings wrapped and ready to go, it's time to get cooking. Back in medieval times, they didn't have ovens, so Alex has recreated a medieval stove on the lawn of Michelin Priory. Don't worry, he did ask first. All 3 of our pom puddings go into the pot together. The plunge?
The plunge. Leave the string out there. On it goes.
And after 2 hours, our puddings are ready.
All right, so still bubbling there, but nice low heat.
They look really sort of dirty because they're sitting in like a butter bath. To be honest, I'm really nervous. Normally I'll eat anything. I'm a bit nervous about this.
But they're not looking too bad.
No.
OK, so this is our medieval.
This is the one I'm really looking forward to. It looks like a dumpling. Throw it straight in there, peel off the muslin, take the top off, and it should create a pond.
Time for the moment of truth. Will our medieval pudding make a pond?
OK.
There you go.
Right.
Oh, hang on. It's butter that's soaked into the dough.
I think our pond has run dry, though, Paul. Go on, give it a try, then. Go on.
The thing is, it doesn't actually taste too bad.
No.
I'm saying that to my head. But actually, it actually doesn't taste too bad. You know what? You know, that's medieval. That's 11th century pudding. And it's not too bad.
It's not too bad.
I mean, it's bad, but it's not too bad.
Next, the 18th century pudding with the dried fruits and spices.
Now, that looks more like a pudding, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And again, not a drop of ponding butter in sight.
No, that's better.
It's better, yeah?
Yeah, it's like a Christmas pudding.
Huh.
That's how it should be.
And finally, the 1950s lemon and cinnamon version.
I'm going to try and cut it right down the middle.
Yeah. Take it away. Well,
It's like the medieval one, but with lemon.
OK.
So, I think we've taken a step back.
So there we have it, 3 Sussex pond puddings from 3 different centuries. But the common theme, a distinct lack of, well, pond. I wonder if I can do any better myself. For my recipe, I'm bringing pond pudding bang up to date with flavours that would have knocked the socks off those medieval serfs. It's my chocolate, orange and hopefully ponding pond pudding.
Hi, Alex. Welcome
Hi.
to the kitchen. I had a great time making that pond pudding, which wasn't so much of a pond, but we decided it could have been something else.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, having gone back to the historical sources, in fact, one of the earliest recipes, which is 1672, refers to a pudding being cut open and there being a pound of butter in there and not a pond of butter. So I think we've done a bit of revision there.
Well done, Alex.
And we're rewriting the culinary history of Sussex.
Easy as that, really. Now, what I'm going to make is a chocolate and orange version of pond pudding.
I'm making a sweet suet pastry by adding the zest of 1 orange to some self-raising flour. Then, throw in some cocoa powder, caster sugar, and lastly, some finely grated suet. Mix the ingredients together by hand, then pour in a little milk to bring it all together.
At this stage, I just want to see how much of that flour this liquid's going to pick up. So I'm going to get my hands in there now. Don't be afraid to get your hands in there, because at the end of the day, you remember when you're mixing pastries and doughs what it should feel like. That is perfect.
Once the dough has come together, Turn it out onto a lightly floured board and work it a little to build up the gluten.
It's coming together nicely. Now I need to put a little bit of dough to one side for the lid. That will probably be enough. Pop that down there. Now I've got a dish which I've buttered. I'm not using a muslin.
No, fully up to date, this version.
Now, what I want to do is line this bowl now with this beautiful suet chocolate pastry. Now, do you think, is it quite uncommon for that to happen, a sort of change in language throughout the years? Is it a bit like Chinese whispers, or just the way our language has been formed?
No, very much so. I mean, I think in this case, you've got two words that sound and look very similar. And, of course, in the 16th, 17th centuries, you know, you could spell things in a number of ways. I think Shakespeare spelt his own name about 17 different ways. So, you know, what happens is you get these different spellings of things, and then when people go back to the original document, they think it means something else. And that's exactly what I think has happened with the Sussex pond or pound pudding, is that someone's gone back to it. The pound has been abbreviated to pond, and they've just taken that as read and built their own interpretation from it.
I think you're right. The Old English, I mean, you see the Old English now, you know, is it the F that's the S, or the S that's the F?
And S, yeah, and the th is a different character entirely. When you look at ye olde, actually the Y in ye is actually a th sound. It's called a thorn.
Right.
But of course we say ye now because it looks like a Y. So we've got all of these changes over time, and as you say, sort of like Chinese whispers, the meaning changes as well.
Yeah. Now what I've got here, I've got my dish which has been lined with that beautiful pastry. Now what I need to do is get the filling in there. Now I've got butter here.
Now that's good to see. Butter's important for me. You know, you're messing with a Sussex tradition here, and I think the thing that's keeping it real for Sussex is the butter. And I read actually in the diary of a Georgian shopkeeper, he said he ate a pudding which had so much butter in it you could have drowned a pig in it.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So you need a lot of butter.
Right, I've got a load of butter in there. I've put some brown sugar in there as well. I've got orange, which I'm going to stab to release all those flavours of the orange in there.
Yeah.
I love oranges.
And so this is where you think your pond is going to come from, do you think?
This and the fact of the melting butter and the sugar, which is going to turn almost like a toffee.
Yeah, lovely.
Now that goes in there, right in the middle.
OK.
And then I'm going to put the rest of the butter around there as well.
Wow.
Then the sugar on top of that. So it's not really enriched at all, really. And then I've got some chocolate, which is going to get thrown in there, and that's all going to melt together.
Yeah.
Now, I've got the lid here. I'm just going to push that onto the top and then allow the rest of it just to fold over onto the top like that. And there you have it. That's our basic pom pudding. Pop the paper over the top, fold it down the side. Happy with that. Now get a load of string.
When steaming puddings, make sure you put a sheet of greaseproof paper underneath the foil to prevent it from sticking.
So what I've done is just tied it round, and I'm just making a little carrier on the top.
And as if by magic, here's one I made earlier.
There we have it. So now I'm going to cut off the string, take away the lid. That smells amazing. Chocolate, orange, the whole thing going on. That is going to be something special.
I do wonder what the medieval peasant farmer would be doing at this moment if you'd revealed this pudding to him.
Probably having a coronary, thinking, what on earth is that? Now, here we go. Plate. That, I felt like it just dropped straight out. It's hot. Right, I'm going to try and take this off. Right, it's coming off.
OK, here we go.
That looks like an ancient pudding straight away. But do you think this will pond?
It looks the part, it really does. And if it ponds, all the better.
Drum roll, please.
That is a chocolate and orange pond pudding. We're going to have to wait a little bit longer to try it.
That smells delicious, though.
There you have it, a Hollywood adaptation of a medieval classic. My indulgent chocolate orange pom pudding, complete with a fruity, oozy core. Sussex, this one's for you. Still to come, I discover a forgotten ingredient now making a very British comeback.
I'm really looking forward to this dish.
But first, it's a pudding masterclass with the multi-Michelin starred chef, Tom Kerridge.
There are lots of dishes I cook now that bring back wonderful childhood memories, and there's nothing better than home cooking, especially a meal made by your mum. Is there, Tom?
Nothing better than the one done by your mum, no.
The thing is, though, when you look back on cooking that your mum made, I look back very fondly, but in fact, I was up there probably about a month ago, and she made me these little ginger biscuit things. They don't look, you know, Michelin star, they don't look like something I'd produce now, but they just tasted so good.
It's all about flavour, though, isn't it? Food, for me, it's what it tastes like is the most important thing. Doesn't matter, it can look as flash as all you like, but if it tastes rubbish, there's no point in eating it.
I couldn't agree more. Now, you've got some ingredients here that I know what this is going to be.
Yeah.
And I love this.
Yeah.
This is an absolute classic, made well. And I think with lots of, you need that sauce, that extra, you know, the proper custard in there as well.
A little bit of extra custard. It's bread and butter pudding. It's one of the dishes that my mum used to make on a Sunday. She used to call it bread pudding, not bread and butter pudding. That's the difference, I think.
Well, listen, mate, my kitchen is your kitchen.
All right.
Welcome.
Thank you very much.
Anything you want to know where it is, just let me know and I'll sort it out.
OK, first thing, sliced white bread. Now, you could use flashy bread.
No, you don't.
Exactly. My sentiments exactly. You don't want that. You want sliced white bread, sandwichy stuff.
Yeah, and proper butter.
And proper butter, and don't be shy.
Because what you don't want is that dryness, do you? You want that moisture, you want that spoon to sort of drop in and go, oh, yes.
Exactly. This bread's a little fresher, but by the end of the week, when it's dried out a little bit, the way that we do it is spread it with butter, make the custard, and we just leave it to soak for about 20 minutes before we actually cook it, so the bread starts to absorb all that lovely custard.
Yeah.
And then when you cook it, it stays really, like, rich and unctuous. So it's like a proper dessert, rather than two separate things, custard and dry bread. It's one thing.
This is what I think people really want.
Yeah, it's proper homely food. It's stuff that people understand. But it's getting the simple things right. Like fresh nutmeg for me, freshly grated on, and a lot of
Never had that, though.
Really?
Would have been a powder for me in a jar that's probably sitting in the back of my mum's cupboard for about 6 years.
That's it, exactly. My mum's would have been the same, and it would have vanilla pod, using a proper vanilla pod today, but it would have been vanilla extract when I was a kid.
Oh, definitely.
And a little bit of powdered nutmeg, you're right.
So you got your mum's recipe and given a 21st century kick.
Yeah, and that's it, pretty much, yeah. My mum would be very pleased with it.
Tom cuts his buttered bread into triangles and starts on the all-important custard.
So I've got a pint of double cream. So it's a vanilla pod just been scraped and the seeds go in. So I've got 8 free-range lovely yellow yolks and some caster sugar.
That's really yolky, that one, isn't it?
It's really yolky, yes. This is the thing that will kind of thicken.
Do you go back home and your mum still does any cooking for you?
She does a little bit, yeah. She still likes doing that Sunday lunch thing. So, I mean, she's still back in Gloucester where she lives, and my brother's still there, and every now and then I'm able to get back on a Sunday lunch.
Now you're in this position, you know, this lofted position as a chef that you are now, does she ever come round to your place to eat and say, son, what are you doing? Does she ever criticise, or does she ever, it's all praise?
No, it makes her more nervous, and I have to tell her off, because you grow up with your mum's cooking and absolutely love it, and then knowing that your mum can cook, like, she's not a Michelin-starred chef, but she can cook like most good mums. She every now and then rings me up and asks me the most ridiculous question, like, when do I put the sprouts on for a Sunday? And I'm like, you've been doing it 50 years, mum. You know, so
do you know what it is?
makes her nervous.
They just want to hear from you, though.
Yeah,
they just want to phone up their boy and say, listen, I had my mum phone up about the same thing, about a pastry. She wants a rich short crust. I said, well, drop an egg in it. Oh, do you think? Yeah, drop an egg in it. Oh, OK. And it's only because their mates were there, probably, and she got off the phone and she goes, Paul said drop an egg in it. It's absolutely...
that is probably true, actually. Maybe my mum had some friends around just checking when to put the sprouts on.
Is there anything that you've taken from your mum which you've taken to the pub to cook, and it's been a massive hit?
Actually, it's not dishes as such, it's an attitude. And that, my mum's love of food and that understanding. We grew up where my mum didn't have very much money. It was a single-parent family, but when my mum cooked, she cooked properly. So whether it was a stew or spaghetti bolognese or whatever else, that attitude to food being true and lovely and flavoursome rather than the cheap option and going down frozen packets or whatever else. Yeah. I mean, that attitude to food is one that has definitely been installed in me, that understanding of trying to make sure that food is loved and cared for and is fun as well.
Yeah, exactly.
When the double cream comes to the boil, Tom pours it onto the eggs and sugar and whisks thoroughly before passing through a sieve.
Right, so I've got here a lined oven-proof tray, and I'm just going to pour a little bit of the custard into the bottom of it.
Yeah.
And then a sprinkle of raisins. And you can see that custard's already beginning to thicken.
Yeah, I know.
Just from the temperature.
I like it you're putting the raisins at the bottom as well.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of people put the bread at the bottom and then pour the custard, and then it doesn't always settle, it doesn't always sit. So this way, we're just going to put the bread on top, and you can enjoy getting your fingers messy in this one.
Tom layers the buttered bread into the tray before pouring on another layer of creamy custard.
And you can see that bread start to absorb all the custard and go all nice and soft. And then some more raisins, and then just don't be scared. Push it in.
That's critical to me. I've seen so many bread and butter puddings where it's just not hit and it's still dry to almost toast.
Yeah, there'd be nothing worse, would there, than taking a spoonful of it and getting, a little bit of dry bread.
Yeah.
That's not bread pudding, is it?
No, definitely not.
Tom then repeats the process one more time before leaving it to sit for 20 minutes so the bread can absorb all that lovely custard. He then bakes it at 130 degrees for 25 to 30 minutes until the custard is set.
And this one has just been cooked.
Whoa.
You see it's just set up. There's a bit of runny custard underneath.
Nothing wrong with that.
The bread has just absorbed all that custard flavour. I'm going to give it a sprinkling Demerara sugar.
You love food, don't you?
I absolutely love it. I think it's the best thing ever. And do you know what? It's not always the posh ingredients. You know, I like the cheaper stuff. As long as it tastes great, it doesn't matter how much it costs. Do you know what I mean? I mean, there's room for expensive ingredients, and don't get me wrong, I love them. But you get a beautiful beef fillet. That animal that comes from also has an amazing oxtail and a fantastic shin. So, you know, even though it's a little bit cheaper, it's still going to be fantastic. And food, I absolutely love it.
Tom adds a brulee twist by giving his pudding the blowtorch treatment.
Did your mum have one of them?
No, she didn't. No, she didn't have a blowtorch. We had a...
Got a lighter?
Yeah, she had a lighter and a really dodgy grill.
I remember my mum's dodgy grill. Has she still got the same oven, my mum? Yeah. I must get her. I'll get you a new oven, mum. It's awful.
Don't worry if you haven't got a blowtorch. Stick your pudding under the grill for the same effect.
A Michelin-starred chef caramelising his sugar on a bread and butter pudding. What more do you want?
It's great, isn't it? And with a big smile on my face, because you're looking at it, I mean, how lush does that look?
I know,
you just go...
You're leaning against an open door here, Tom.
Yeah. For me, you can't beat that.
You're a legend, mate. Absolute legend. Can't wait to tuck into that.
Tom's mum's bread and butter pudding is an absolute classic, and the addition of fresh nutmeg and caramelised sugar makes this a truly sweet treat. Later, more from Tom, and he's got a surprise for me up his sleeve.
And then this is some recipes from your mum.
From my mum?
A challenge to bake my mum's classics.
Now, I'm going to create my mum's tea time treats. They are Ginger Biscuits and Jam Tarts, and see what you think.
Love them.
Every now and then, I like to recreate an old classic. Maybe it's because I'm a bit of an old classic myself. My next recipe includes an ingredient that was common in medieval times, but it's making a comeback.
My next recipe is a pie using one of those legendary food combinations, pork and apple. But I want to add something different to give it an extra punch. I've been told of a magical medieval ingredient that fits the bill, and there are just a few people who still make it. This is Richard Purton, one of the very few producers in Britain making this unusual ingredient that's got so many chefs excited. So what exactly is it?
Verre jus is the juice of any unripe fruit that is used in cooking.
Biting into unripe fruit tastes sour and acidic, but this flavour, known as verre jus, was popular in kitchens for centuries. However, as the world developed, it was replaced and forgotten.
The reason that verre jus fell out of popularity was because there were loads of lemons and limes around, and they were coming from all over the world, so people could get sourness anyway. Also, vinegar had been invented and perfected, so there was a lot of vinegar around, and there was just no need to go scrubbing around in orchards looking for fallen fruit anymore. The main difference between the verjus that I make and the one that's made in France and a lot of other places in the world is that I make mine out of underripe apples, and they use grapes.
In 2010, Richard decided to bring back verjus to the British kitchen.
I started making verjus just from the fruit in my back garden, so I hit upon the idea of just trying a small batch commercially. And then I had the idea, well, I'll just see what other chefs think of this. So I took it round to a few local restaurants, and it was very successful. So the following year I made a bit more, and so on. Verjus can be used for all sorts of cooking. It's fantastic in savoury dishes with pork, oily fish, duck, even in vegetarian dishes. And it's wonderful on desserts. You can concentrate it down and drop it on desserts. You can use it to add even more appliness to apple pie. You can make a fantastic sorbet out of it.
Today, Richard has come to Brogdale, home of the National Fruit Collection, to seek inspiration for a new blend of verjus. He's going to concoct a unique infusion, especially for my pork and apple pie. Richard combines 3 flavours of apple to make his verjus. 1 aromatic, 1 sweet, and 1 acidic.
I'm going to start off with the acidic juice because that is the one that I know is going to form the main part of the verjus. The next most important one really isn't the sweetness, but the aromatic one. And finally, the sweet one. We don't want too much of that because it's going to turn that into more like an apple juice. That should be about right now, so have a little taste. Oh, that's it. The acidity is really coming through well now. And I think that's just about the perfect verjus.
Once he's got his base sorted, Richard could then experiment with other unripe fruit flavours.
You can smell ripe blackberries in there, but it has got a sort of a sharp, leafy backdrop.
Blackberry isn't right for my pork and apple pie, but sage will complement the ingredients perfectly. So, Richard's preparing a sage-infused apple verjus just for me.
I'm going to chuck the whole bottle in. I'm going to put the lid on this, put it in the fridge overnight. With fingers crossed, it'll make a really good apple and sage verjus, which will be perfect for Paul.
I've never come across verjus before, but I can't wait to give it a whirl in my pie.
I had no idea what verjus was. Apparently it's been around for a long, long time.
Yeah, well, it sort of originated way back in Mesopotamia. In fact, they still use it a lot in the Middle East, and it's called huzrun.
So which one do you recommend that we try here?
Well, in order to taste it, first of all, I would just start off with just the plain verjus.
Okay.
And then you can try the sage one if you like to see if the sage levels are going to be right for your dish.
So you wouldn't normally have this as a drink. This is an addition to something, a sauce or...
Yeah, you use it instead of lemon juice or vinegar in a sauce or in a dressing.
Can I have a little taste then, please? So it was really when lemons and limes came around from abroad that this whole thing became, well, not obsolete, but it certainly quietened down and then died away slowly. Yeah,
because before that, the need to get sour things into cooking was such that, you know, there was only really vinegar and lemons for a short period in certain parts of Europe when they were in season.
Straight away you can tell it's apple. Certainly the aftertaste tells you what it is. But you've got this very peppery flavour to it, the sharpness to it as well. And it does sort of dance around your tongue quite a bit, doesn't it?
Yeah, and there's a bit of grassiness there as well from the greenness of the apples.
So this is the one you've made to go in the pie, actually, the sage and apple. Can I try a little bit of this one, please?
Yeah. I mean, I thought that the sage in there might actually reinforce the sage that you're putting in the pie anyway.
Probably could, actually. It's an apple juice, but it reminds me of something with that sage gone in it. It's a very rounded flavour with the sage in it. Right. I'm going to show you how to do a dish. So what I'm going to do is do a pork and apple pie, but I'm using a very different type of pastry.
To start my pie filling, I've sweated off some diced onions and celery until soft. I then put the softened vegetables aside and melt some butter with a splash of oil in the same pan.
Pork and apple's a marriage made in heaven, isn't it?
I mean, the good thing, particularly about the sharpness of this apple, is that it cuts through any of the oil that might be in the pork, any of the fat in the pork, and balances it out perfectly.
Next, sear the chunks of pork in hot butter and oil.
Now these are browning off nicely. I love pork. Pork's one of my favourites.
So what cut of pork are you using in this?
It's shoulder.
Once the pork has been browned, return the onion and celery mixture to the pan. Next, add some flour to the pan to coat the meat, which will also help thicken the sauce later.
Beautiful. Then I'm going to have my cider and chicken stock. The smell of this is incredible. If you haven't got any veggies then, what do you think you'd add to this?
Well, you can use apple juice. Try and find a sharp apple juice. If you can find a Bramley, you know, you can buy single variety apple juices in a lot of farm shops. If you can find a Bramley juice, use that. And if you want to sharpen it up a bit still, because the verjuice is actually sharper than the Bramley, just add a small amount of lemon to it.
Now, roughly chop the apples. I'm using a mixture of Cox's and Bramley apples. The Bramley apples will break down as they cook, whereas the Cox's will keep some of their bite.
Add your apple and sage to this beautiful mixture. Give it a bit of a stir.
Cook this mixture down for 45 minutes. Allow to cool and pop it in the fridge to chill.
Let's run through the pastry ingredients. This is unusual.
Adding the cider and the olive oil first, I'm putting in the ingredients the wrong way around.
Egg, straight in. Swish this up a little bit.
I add baking powder and 3/4 of the flour and mix thoroughly.
This is really odd. Because you're adding so much olive oil to this, the pastry actually looks a bit like a hot water crust pastry. It's a strange one, this one. Now add the rest of the flour. Stir this around.
When the dough has come together, turn it out and fold a couple of times.
And the whole pastry feels quite buoyant, quite alive. And you can see the way it breaks up there with the little bubbles in it.
Chill the dough in the fridge for 10 minutes, then rest at room temperature for 5 minutes, and the pastry is ready to roll.
There you have it. The pastry's almost sweating with the amount of olive oil in there.
Break off a small piece and roll into a long, thin strip to form the rim of the pie.
And this will help the lid bind to this when you put it in the oven. There you go. Now I've got my mix here. It has been cooled and is ready to go inside, but I'm also going to add, this is the sage and apple verjus. Give it a little bit of a mix round together. I'm really looking forward to this dish. This floats my boat, this. Pork and apple. Ooh, come here. Get a spoon. Now what you've got to do is keep that funnel in the middle and just put your ingredients in around that funnel. Try and keep it as central as possible. Ooh, yes. The funnel is a very ancient way of making a pie. You had the funnel sticking out the top. It's just to let the steam out to allow it to come out. Some people now just pierce it, but it's a very old-fashioned way of baking. Very British in its approach. Now I'm going to get a little bit of flour, roll out the pastry for the lid. Right. Keep on moving it. The olive oil has made it quite a tough old pastry, this. I don't mean tough as in chew. It just means it's quite robust. You can be quite, you know, rough with it. Bring over your pie. Place the lid over the top.
Cover the pie with the rolled out pastry and make a hole for the funnel.
Get a knife, cut round, and then all you do, a little bit of crimping around the outside, fingers in again, just push it together, go all the way around the outside. There you have it. A very beautiful looking pie.
Before baking, brush the top of the pie with a beaten egg and bake at 200 degrees Celsius for 30 to 35 minutes.
I've got one in here that's been cooking for about that time now. Look at that.
That's fantastic.
That smells absolutely gorgeous. Now that is a proper pork and apple cider pie with sage and apple verjus. Verjuice, if you're in Kent. We're gonna have to wait a little bit longer before we get a chance to try it, but thank you very much for bringing this in.
Thanks very much. It's good to watch you make it.
My pork and apple pie is a match made in heaven, and the addition of the verjus elevates it to a whole new level. Earlier, Tom Kerridge made me a bread and butter pudding, a dish he learnt from his mum. Now, he's got a surprise for me. It's a letter from my mum.
And this is some recipes from your mum.
From my mum.
From your mum.
It's instructions for my next baking challenge.
Jam Tart, she's written terribly difficult, you do the grams. She's written all in ounces. Then she's got on Ginger Biscuits. OK, I'm going to create my mum's tea time treats. They are Ginger Biscuits and Jam Tarts, and see what you think.
Love them.
I've been baking professionally for years, and I can rustle up a loaf with my eyes shut. But having to do justice to my mum's Jam Tarts and Ginger Biscuits, no pressure.
I'm going to start with the Ginger Biscuits, Tom. If you just check that method out, I'm passing that on to a Michelin-starred chef, Mum.
Melt marge, sugar and syrup gently in a pan.
OK.
Margarine.
Margarine, OK.
Not butter.
Not butter. Margarine, of course.
OK.
In a pan.
Yeah.
Right, OK. Margarine goes in. Syrup. Yeah, I remember this coming out of the bowl when I was a kid, thinking, what's that?
Golden syrup.
Yeah.
It's amazing stuff.
I know. It's been around for donkey's years, hasn't it?
Yeah.
And what else is in there? The sugar.
Sugar.
She's almost making a caramel, isn't she?
Yeah.
OK.
Have you not made these before?
No. Not like this.
You left them to your mum, yeah?
Yeah. If I was coming home, my mum would invariably make a barrel full of the biscuits.
Yeah.
Now, if I park that, that's for the ginger biscuits, OK, that. Now, when it comes to the jam tarts, I sort of figure this one out. Flour. She got self-raising flour, has she?
She's got self-raising flour, 6 ounces of it.
Yeah, that's about right. And she used butter or marge?
Butter or marge, 3 ounces of it. It's up to you, but it looks like you've got a choice here, chef.
I'm using butter. So I'm going to crush this. Did you say what to do?
Rub together ingredients with small amount of water.
What, with water?
That's what it says, chef. We're doing 2 at once. It's confusing.
Yeah, I know.
The bit here where it says terribly difficult, she's right. There's 3 ingredients and we're getting it wrong.
I know, yeah. Well, I've got water here. How much water does she say?
It just says small amount.
And that's it?
That's it.
I can't bring... It needs more water. Maybe. Oh, hang on. I think I made this too wet now. I can bring that back.
There you go, look.
I can bring that back. OK. Now, if I get some flour, I'd rather have a slightly wetter paste and then work... Did she say anything about work it together?
No, she just says roll onto a board, use a pastry cutter to cut out about 20 shapes.
Rolling pin. I've hardly touched this. I've just left it as it is, so it's quite buttery, you know.
Yeah. I suppose that you could use that as a dough for other stuff as well.
Is that what... Did she say in there?
No, I'm just adding that. I won't do that. Sorry, Paul's mum. I was just thinking, I wonder what else you could do with that.
Well, jam tart is pretty much about it, really, isn't it? And I'm going to cut out the jam tarts.
Once the pastry is cut out, pop them into a greased cupcake tin. Meanwhile, the butter, sugar and syrup have all melted for my mum's ginger biscuits.
Smells like my mum's biscuits.
With dried ginger.
Yeah.
That powdered stuff, there's nothing like it. It's really intense, isn't it? It's a flavour that I always remember as a kid from whether it's steamed puddings or biscuits. That dried ginger's lovely.
I'm going to come back to that. I'm going to carry on with these. So, is she given any baking instructions?
OK, put into individual cupcake tray and add teaspoon of jam into each.
A teaspoon?
A teaspoon, not too much. This is with an exclamation mark, mind. Not too much, or it will ooze everywhere. So that's a warning there, Chief.
Oh, OK. I'm happy with that. I get a good teaspoon. Does she say what jam?
No.
I've got raspberry here.
OK, raspberry jam.
OK.
Gas mark 5 or 6, 200 degrees centigrade, 400 degrees Fahrenheit, and cook until pastry is pale and brown. Maybe 30 minutes.
30 minutes for these? Yeah. They'd be as black as coal. 30 minutes? Mother? Maybe an hair oven.
Yeah.
That one that never quite... The dial comes off all the time. What's this setup? Now, those jam tarts are ready. Now, when it comes to the ginger biscuits, what did she say? I've got the paste ready.
OK. roll into 50 pea-sized balls, place on a baking tray, mark the back with a fork, makes about 40 biscuits.
40?
Yeah.
Do you reckon you get 40 from that?
Roll into 50 pea-sized balls.
I think these are about right. I remember getting glossy hands when I was a kid making these. I'll do 9 on this.
9, not 40.
40? I mean, there's no way I'll get 40. Maybe it's my mum's eyes.
You're not going to get away with that
I'm
one.
dead, aren't I?
Yeah.
I remember this pastry when I was a kid because I used to nibble on it.
Raw cake mix.
Raw cake mix. Because of the ginger, you can sort of get away with it. So she doesn't flatten them, she just uses a fork.
Mark with back off fork.
So, OK. All right. I remember the fork going on them, because I remember there was always a slight indentation when they came out. It's pretty basic, though, isn't it?
Yeah, but when you were a young'un, that's pretty exciting, isn't it?
Yeah.
You say it's basic, I'm looking at it going, I can't wait for a jam tart.
What did you say about the bake on the ginger biscuits?
Approximately 12 minutes, gas mark 4, 180 degrees centigrade or 350 degrees Fahrenheit until golden brown. Or a little bit longer to make dunkers.
OK, I want some dunkers. I can't wait to see what these come out like when they're baked. Tom, I think we're going to have to reveal them at the table later.
Looking forward to it.
That's the name. Thank you, I'll take one of those.
It's time for my guests to sample today's dishes, and I hope they enjoy them.
This is the best part of the day. It's time to tuck in. This is pork and apple in there, and there's some mash too.
Pork and apple pie.
Pork and apple is a great flavour combination, and I can't wait to taste it with Richard's Verjus.
You are getting that sharpness on you from it.
Really sharp.
And the sage comes through really well as well,
The sage does come through.
without being too powerful.
Do you like that, Tom?
That's a delicious pie.
It's that apple, isn't it?
The apple's so good with it.
Can't beat a good pie.
I loved exploring the historic Pom Pudding with Alex and coming up with my own modern twist. Not only does it taste great, but it actually pons. Get it?
Oh, I'm liking that.
Yeah. Chocolate and orange.
That's magical.
That's proper, isn't it?
I mean, there's no going back now. Certainly not to the medieval version I cooked.
I want to try this bread and butter pudding now.
For me, this looks just like my mum would have done it. It's a pudding. The bread has absorbed all the custard in it.
That is stunning. You lucky lad growing up with that.
And finally, a jam tart and ginger biscuit dunker from days gone by.
For a very simple and easy biscuit recipe to do, this is lovely.
Oh, that's good. It's so simple.
Your mum's got this sewn up.
We're going to start a business, but it's going to happen. We've definitely recreated some British classics today, including my mum's jam tarts. I hope you'll try these delicious recipes too. Anyone for another jam tart?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a winner.
Cheers, Mum.
Yeah. Cheers, Mum.